welcome to the Restoring Our City podcast, our platform where we have candid conversations on today's topics that help connect our community. And we are thrilled to have a very special guest, Maryanne George from Maverick City Music. And we have a great empowering conversation on chasing our dreams and being who we were called to be. And so we really hope you enjoy this week's episode. And special thanks to our co-host this week, Wesley Varughese, who jumped in. So we appreciate all his help as well. If you haven't already, you can follow and subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and you can also watch the video version of the episode on YouTube. And feel free to engage with us in the conversation as well. We'd love to hear from you. You can follow us on our social media handles at Restoring Our City on Facebook and Instagram, and as well as Twitter. You can find all those handles on our website at restoringourcity.org. So we hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome, everyone, to the Restoring Our City podcast. My name is Jobin. We're super excited to bring you another episode in season 3 of our podcast. It's been a wild ride. We are in 2021, which is, I think, thank God that we are in 2021. And we're super excited for this episode. And we have a special co-host with us all the way from across the world. And he was actually one of our guests from the last season, Wesley Varughese, all the way from Dubai. Wesley, how are you doing, man?
Good, man. Good to be here, living the dream out here. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. And I appreciate you jumping on. And I think it's midnight or something crazy. So I appreciate you being on. You've been a friend to Restoring Our City for so many years. And it's so awesome to have you collaborate. And I know you are friends with our very special guest, Maryanne George, who is an artist with Maverick City, and she is on with us. Maryanne, how are you?
I'm good. It's good to be here. Thanks for being here, Wesley.
No, we're excited to have you on, and we wanted to kind of just pick your brain and learn a little bit about your story. And we are doing this series of leadership and spotlighting folks who are really taking the charge and leading the way in our community and empowering others really from a Christian perspective. And I know you're doing that through your role with Maverick City. And so we wanted to get to know you a little bit, Maryanne. So how are you doing? First of all, I know the world is still in this crazy pandemic. How are you and your family doing?
We're doing great. I mean, my husband is like working in a hospital, so I feel like he's pretty exposed to stuff like that. So I feel like we've gotten to the point now where we're just like, I have to travel for work as well. So I travel and he's in the hospital. So we're kind of like, okay.
Oh boy.
I mean, if this thing gets us, I had coronavirus already. He did not, but he just took the vaccine.
Okay.
So yeah, we're feeling okay though. We're doing pretty well.
No, glad that you're feeling well. And I know obviously with traveling and being in the healthcare industry, it's crazy, all those factors that could impact you, but glad that you're safe. And it's really encouraging to see what you're doing as an artist as well. So we kind of want to dig into all of that, but tell us a little bit about yourself, Maryanne, like where are you from and where'd you grow up?
Yeah, so I grew up in Long Island and in New York. And so I grew up in a Christian home, like many of us, a Pentecostal home, went to a Pentecostal church that was predominantly Indian. Actually, it was all Indian for pretty much the time that I lived in New York. And then in 2017, I moved out to Missouri, St. Louis, which is where my husband is from. So I've been here ever since then. But yeah, I did grow up majority of my life in the Northeast. So I definitely am a New Yorker. I always preface that when I meet people. I'm like, yeah, I live in St. Louis, but I'm not a St. Louis person like at all. But I feel like now that I've been here for over 3 years, I'm like, okay, I probably am.
You're more of a St. Louis person now.
I'm like more of a Midwesterner now. And I feel like even sometimes my accent has changed. Like people feel like my accent has changed.
Oh, that's good. That's the purpose of this podcast.
It's not good, Joey. It's not
No,
good.
I feel like we are trying to influence the world to be Midwesterners, right? We're a healthy balance.
No, yeah. It's a healthy balance. I really enjoy what the Midwest has taught me. Like I feel like I've learned so much being here. So it's really beautiful. I love it.
Awesome. I was going to ask you if like St. Louis is really like the Ozarks. I don't know if you've seen that show on Netflix. I don't know if it's really like that.
I have not seen that show, but I've heard a lot about it.
Okay.
I feel like my in-laws live like in more southern Missouri, so it's more country. Um, but I don't live there, so I feel like I'm not as acquainted with that part of like country living in the Midwest, I guess. I don't know, but we're living in a city. We live pretty much in the city.
Oh, cool.
And so yeah, it's been pretty good. I don't know if I can handle living in a country, but
Yeah.
we'll
Yeah.
see. If God brings us there, then we'll have to be there.
Okay.
So yeah.
So tell us a little bit about how you got into just your musical role. Like, did you grow up like wanting to become a musical artist, or did you start on a different path and then deviated?
Yeah, so definitely since I grew up in a pretty Christian home, like I also grew up in a home that was also very musical. So both my parents are actually worship leaders, and my aunts and uncles all sang, and they were also worship leaders. So I feel like every like event, whether it was Christmas, like holiday, birthday, whatever, always ended with like a time of prayer and worship. And so it didn't matter if you could hold a tune or not, like you had to sing or play something. So I grew up in that kind of environment. So I feel like I was always kind of singing or playing an instrument. So my first ever exposure to music was playing violin. My parents taught me or made me learn violin at the age of 4. So I picked it up at that age, which was very young. And so I think also my mom used to like sing and when she was pregnant with me. And I feel like that actually does play a role, like in
Wow.
Oh
they
wow.
say like listening, your baby listening to sounds and exposing them to all those things like early. I don't know. I feel like ever since then I've been picking up music and I have an ear for it. So I just kind of like am able to pick up things, fiddle around and get a melody and I've learned how to do that. And my cousins who I've grown up with and my brother all have that same ability. So it's pretty
Oh, wow.
crazy. I don't know how to teach it. I don't know how it's taught, but it's something we all got being around our family and stuff. So I didn't answer the second part. Sorry. I didn't answer the rest of your question. I definitely did not grow up wanting to be a musician person. Like I think I just assumed it was not something that I could do. Like being in our culture and community, it was not something that was like a obvious choice for me, but I loved it. And I grew up doing it in church and it was always associated with like a hobby of mine. It was always associated as a hobby of mine.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of my journey with it so far.
Yeah. No, that's interesting to hear. I mean, even I've heard that before from other folks who are really passionate about music,
Mm-hmm.
but they never thought of it as a career. So what was that turning point for you? Or maybe let's take a step back. What did you want to pursue in the beginning?
I think we all know like what Indians want us to do. So we typically steer towards medical professions or I don't know, like engineering. That was never an option for me. Engineering was not something I ever like thought I would do, but medicine was always something I was geared towards. So that was something I thought I would do for a long time. And then in my undergrad, I decided in the middle that I really wanted to do counseling because I'd started a InterVarsity in my college campus. And so that experience really, I feel like God was leading me into the counseling field. So I did that and I loved it. I got my master's in it and I graduated in 2018. And around that time, I started to also do some covers on Instagram and started to make some friends in different parts of the country. And some of my friends from one of my friends from Reading like really encouraged me to start tagging the songwriters in my covers. So I started to do that and I started to gain some traction. And in 2019, I was invited to be on an album for Chandler Moore, who's like one of the members of Maverick now. But I was invited to like lead on his album for one of the songs that I had covered. So at that event is where I met some of the founders of Maverick, and it was not a thing at that time. It was a songwriting camp. So they invited me to come to write some songs, and nobody knew that I wrote. I didn't publicize it. I wrote a few songs here and there. I was a writer. I feel like I like to write stuff. But I never co-wrote, never did anything like that. So he invited me to come out and do this. And I was like, hey, I think you're like making the wrong decision. Like, don't invite me.
Wow.
Because I don't know that I like have, and he was like, no, just trust me. Like, I think you should come. So then I started doing that in like June of 2019. And it had started to become Maverick at that point, Maverick City Music. So started being part of those camps. And then by the end of 2019, I knew I had to make a decision. Well, they told me, they were like, well, we can put you into more songwriting sessions, but is this something you really want to commit to? It's kind of a decision you're going to have to make. Because at that point, I'd gone through all of 2019 not working, kind of just graduated. I graduated early. I'd moved programs when I was living in New York. I had started my master's. And because of the certain number of credits you can transfer over, I ended up taking like a semester off to move out and come here. And then, so I finished like 6 months earlier to make up for that time. And so I gave myself a huge break in the beginning of 2019. I was just like, I don't want to go crazy. I just want to like relax for a little bit and then maybe start looking for jobs. But it was in that year that I started to do more of the co-writing. And so then they invited me out to do more. And then in November of 2019, after some time of prayer, I made the decision to go full time. And it was against what I really wanted, because the security of having a 9-to-5 is very appealing to me. So like, it's just like, what you're like, being a songwriter is not a lucrative thing, honestly, unless you're like the writer of like How Great Is Our God, then yeah, you're probably making a lot of money. But that's most likely not the case for most of us. And it takes some time for us to get to those places, even if it does happen. And so the 9-to-5 was so appealing to me, and I didn't want to do it. But after prayer, I didn't want to do songwriting. But after prayer, I felt God was really clear with me about it. And he told me he would provide for me, even though I had no experience. I feel like I went from 0 to 100 very quickly in terms of like writing. And my first co-writing sessions were with like people who wrote the songs we sing every day, like every other week in church, like Build My Life. These big songwriters that I'm like, oh my God, why am I in this room with you? But yeah, those are like my first. So it felt like I had a lot of imposter syndrome, because I was just like, what am I doing here? Like, but God was very clear. And ever since then, I think it's been over a year now. Ever since then, I've been doing it full time. So it's been a crazy journey. Yeah.
So Maryanne, I know there was a lot of foundational pieces that happened probably on the way before you finally got immersed in Maverick. I think you mentioned you had friends in Reading. Can you talk about some of the experiences you had leading up to it? I think you went on some journey out there at some point, I think.
Yes, I did. So in 2018, I had gotten like a few job offers from so I got a job offer at Elevation Church, and they had found me very randomly through YouTube, which was like not their normal way of scouting for people.
Wow.
So I had like an affiliation with that church. I had gone out there and actually interviewed for a position, got the job, but I couldn't say yes yet because I was waiting for John, he was not a pediatrician at that time, but he was coming out of med school and needed a spot for residency. So I couldn't make the choice. I wasn't going to like not be in the same state as him. So he ended up matching here in Missouri, and we had to say no to that. But in 2018 later, like I ended up going to Bethel Church for Worship U. And it was there that I had met Jens Jacob. We didn't even really know each other very well. You know how it's like, people, but you don't know people, especially in our community. But Jens was so freaking cool. Like he followed me. We followed each other on social media, and I had documented that I was at Reading. And he messaged me. He's like, hey, I would love to connect you with some of the guys there. Like I know some of them, and I feel like they'd be super interested in your music. And he sent them some of my stuff. So they were, which was like,
that's
talk
crazy.
about like someone in our community, like trying to help another person up. Like it felt super empowering for someone like him. So I'm always grateful for Jens and like the role that he's played in my life. But he just kind of like made a connection for me, met them, got to talk to them a little bit and just form relationship. A lot of music industry, especially in the Christian worship realms, are very relational and connection driven. So I did a lot of that, and I just kind of became friends with them. And it ended up like serving me well, because I feel like they had known of me when Maverick and stuff had started to come up. And so, but yeah, that was a journey that I also took. And it was funny, I was there and God had given me a prophetic word, and they basically prophesied to me like in front of everybody, which was really nerve-wracking because it was like it was almost like 1,000+ people.
Wow.
And it was pretty like prophetic for what's happening now. None of this happened with Maverick at that point. And they basically had this big prophetic word that's basically being fulfilled right now. So it's a pretty big part of the story for me, because I remember being there and being prophesied over, and to see it all kind of to live in the fruition of it now is pretty awesome.
Now, thinking about all of that and what you're doing now, how do you sort of think about the impact of this decision with family in mind and the community and the church? Like, how did you reconcile or sort of come to that decision? What maybe kept you from maybe making the decision so quickly versus maybe something that might have held you back before deciding to go this route?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing that really propelled me was the fact that I knew for certain God had called me to do it. And it was after just praying. I mean, I had people prophesy, all these Indian pastors that used to come to my house and would prophesy over me that I was called to the nations. And people would prophesy about me worship leading, which, I mean, everybody in my church knew that I led worship. I was pretty much there every week. But I don't know, it didn't connect in my brain. It's funny how when you live in our community, we almost put a box around ourselves because we're like, we have a certain level of expectation that we need to fit, or I don't know. So I just kind of placed this box around myself, like, okay, this is how far I can go. And I never in my mind thought it would be to what I'm doing now, like truly. So it's I think once God was very clear with me and it was like, no, this is the way. It's not, this is what I want you to do. This is the way you're going to go. It's not what you thought, but trust me, we're going to make this work and I'm going to provide for you throughout the entire way. So after I got that, and for me, when I get a word from God, I'm like pretty confident about it. So it's not like, I don't know if he said this, like I knew he said it and I felt it. And so I was very confident, and that was a decision I made. And then also being able to tell both sets of parents, like, this is something I really feel God's calling me to do. The fact that they were very supportive of me in that endeavor, like it was another further confirmation that this was what was supposed to happen. And now every time I'm doing it, I'm like, okay, yeah, definitely, this is where I'm supposed to be. It doesn't always feel like I belong here. Like, it's tough. It's not always easy. And I think many people don't know that part, but I know I'm supposed to be here. So.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
I love the way that you put that too. I mean, sometimes we don't feel like we're adequate enough, but
right.
Like
I think that's what I meant to say.
Yeah. No, I think that's super encouraging. It reminds me of this book that I keep reading, from Malcolm Gladwell, The Tipping Point, where there's people who are known as connectors. And it's just hearing your story. There's people that God plants along the way just to connect you and encourage you.
Yes. Jens was one of them. And another friend of mine, Alton Bugs, he was one of them for me in Reading. And it's just been beautiful to see the journey. And honestly, like people in our community, even when I was young, like connected me to good mentors and role models and people I can look up to that taught me what it looks like to worship. And I think that even played a huge role. I still remember Tammy's husband, Sean, played a big role in my life, and was one of the first people to encourage me to sing and lead worship, like in church. And he was someone we all looked up to, and so it's pretty cool. I look back on my life and I'm really grateful for all the people that have played a role in where I'm at now. So
I kind of want to talk a little bit about this creative process that you do. Mm-hmm. And now we're in this weird world with COVID as well, right? Like,
right.
Can you talk to us a little bit about how that's impacted your role and your job and your profession now? How has COVID impacted the creative process for you?
I hate it. I hate it so much. I feel like writing is something very inspirational. It's like driven by inspiration. So there's pros and cons. If I think about it, honestly, the convenience of working from home is great. We do a lot of our writing sessions on Zoom. That was what was the whole beginning of the year. I would have weeks on weeks where I was just literally like on Zoom for what felt like a majority of the day. And we would write songs like on Zoom. And the convenience of being like, hey, like, I need to go to the bathroom just 1 second, and like taking a breather. Like, I don't know, like that is easy. Whereas like when you're in person, it's much harder to be like, hey, I'm just like checked out. Like, give me a second, like to refocus and recenter. Like, but the thing about not being in person is that relational connection. It feels very,
definitely.
It feels just very hard to feel connected via a screen, you know, and also the inspiration of being in new places. Like I loved to go to people's like different states to see people's writing rooms or just be inspired by the state I'm in or the environment I'm in. Like it just it's way more natural. Like these kind of feel very contractual to me. And so it's not, the connection is not the same. So it feels, to me, it takes longer and it's a little harder to write and create something we're all happy with. So that's why, like, thankfully, I am getting to a point now where I feel like comfortable enough with people I trust, like 3 or 4 people in a room to write. So we're starting to do a little bit more of that, where we're just kind of like testing before we come and then like wearing masks and just maybe writing in person and taking it really slow, like not trying to, infect other people. But yeah, it's starting to become a little bit better. It was really tough for me in the beginning of the year, especially being a newer, to me, like a writer that's not as experienced. It felt a little unnatural for me.
Yeah, it seems like it's very mechanical, right? Like,
yes, very mechanical.
It's just weird. And the reason I'm even thinking about it too is because just being a church member, right? Going to church now is a totally different experience. Now I can't even imagine how do you lead people into that from the other side, right? And like even from worship and even the environments, I don't know. Have you seen like this dip? Because I've seen some of the numbers, like church attendance is down, engagement is down. So have you seen anything effective from like the environments or people that you've been around that have helped engage people more in worship? Or
I think that just maintaining like a small group of some sort of like a virtual thing where you're connected with people weekly through a screen, like I think that is helpful. But our church too, like we went down significantly with numbers, not to mention, I feel like there was a lot of political stuff that happened in the church this year or last year. So I feel like people were kind of just in a weird place. Like, so they either just didn't come to church or maybe stopped going to their church because they felt like, they didn't align with certain political statements that were made or things like that. So to me, it's a very uncomfortable time for the church, but I've also never felt like the church died. I feel like the church is very much alive, and it's actually like it's groaning. It's doing its thing. I feel like it's getting back to work, and it should have been a long time ago. So I'm actually like slightly encouraged because I think it's making people think. which, and really value like the importance. I was talking to somebody, a good friend of mine that goes to a pretty large church. And he was saying to me that he almost feels like his church is doing a lot, like too much, like spoon feeding and not allowing people to really practice their faith by themselves. Everything is like just spoon fed. And I was like, that's such an interesting perspective, because I've felt the same way in many ways, not with my church. I don't go to a big mega church, but like a lot of these bigger churches, like in the beginning of the pandemic, were doing so much to make sure everybody is still saved.
Right.
And I get it. I get their role in that way too. Like, so I'm grateful for churches that have put in so much work, but it's also like, this is a threshing. It's kind of like we're separating the chaff from the wheat, and it's not supposed to be comfortable. And sorry, this may have gone on a very big tangent, but
no, that's awesome. I feel like this is like that turning point, right? Like we have to really make our faith authentic, and we have to really live it out, even when there's challenges. No, I appreciate that.
Speaking on that same topic, I know, Maryanne, you had an opportunity to participate in Passion's latest conference.
Oh yeah.
How was that experience compared to exactly what you're talking about with the church? Are they doing anything differently, I guess, that you felt is getting us back on track? Or just tell us about it in general too.
I don't think they were doing anything differently. I think that something about that specific experience for me personally, meeting the Giglios, Pastor Louis and Shelley, I was so blown away by their purity. Like, they just had very pure hearts, and they were super humble and kind. And I think honestly, those things translate into your house, like into your church. And so I felt a lot of peace being there, because I just felt very at rest. And with everything going on in 2020, it just felt like the best way to like end the year. And they were able to, it was not a fully virtual experience, because they had their church youth like scattered throughout the sanctuary, like distant.
Sure.
They were all socially distant, wearing masks and stuff. It was very safe. In fact, I was like really impressed with how safe they were, because even during worship, they were wearing masks. And, but I think like it just felt, even though it was a virtual experience, right? We also have to remember they're a mega church. They have access to so many more resources than we do. But it felt so, I felt so at peace and felt so at home. And I felt like the church was so alive, like, especially in that moment when they had a moment where someone in Brazil was featured virtually and was singing the blessing with Carrie and Cody, Carrie Job and Cody Carnes. Like, and so they were singing together, although they were in different parts of the world. So it just felt like, and we were celebrating every hour. There was like one part of the world was like celebrating the new year. So it felt like we were in this state of celebration with the church, like together, and just like celebrating the new year together. And then when Pastor Lou made us all take communion, it was so beautiful to start off the new year in communion, and it just felt very restful to me. And I think that the experience was the way it was because of the heart of that church, like the heart and the purity of that house, to me, I think makes a difference, you know? So
I have to ask, what was that experience like with Cody and Carrie?
Oh, they're so great. They're so sweet and so down to earth and humble. I was telling Carrie specifically, I was like, you don't understand how many people in my community look up to you. I was like, I mean, I looked up to her growing up, but even being in CFNI, there's so many Indians that that had gone to CFNI and like went and studied at CFNI, especially in our community, like who, like our worship leaders in our community that went to CFNI. So I got to tell her that, and she was so blessed by that. And they're awesome. They're very down to earth people. So I really enjoyed meeting them. And she's a really even better live than she is on her records and albums. She's flawless. Her voice is amazing. Loved it.
That's so cool to hear that.
His too.
Oh, Cody.
Yes, his too.
You know, in our community, sometimes we think of the worship leader or the artist on the album as like this far away world and we can't connect with those folks. But like you're in that now, right? Like not to put you on a pedestal, but like you sought after something and pursued a passion of yours with a genuine interest and obviously God's calling. And like now you're in there, right? And I feel like now there's like this next generation in our community who are looking at you that way, right? At, you know, in that vein. So kind of to Wesley's point, what would you say to the next gen who's looking at Maryanne and be like, oh, I want to sing, or I want to really worship truly from that place? What advice would you give the next gen?
I actually have been feeling this more recently, and I was talking to my therapist about it because I felt like growing up in our community, like I just said earlier, we place this box like around what we can and can't do. And then glory be to God, you know, I'm now doing things that I didn't think I could do. But I feel like you can still carry the mindset of that, those expectations or our cultural expectations, even though you're not necessarily attached as much to that culture or to that environment anymore. Yep. And now that I'm here, I realize that, you know, in many ways, and I don't think this is necessarily one person's fault, but I've forgotten how to dream again, or I've forgotten how to set high goals for myself in this field, or, you know, I mean, just be a kid, like, and think that the world is my oyster, you know? And I think that is something I would encourage everybody, like, don't just because, and I'm saying this mainly because Restoring Our City seems to be a podcast that predominantly focuses on our community. And I don't want anyone to get to this place and then feel like they've forgotten how to do it or they've forgotten how to dream. And I would encourage people to keep dreaming big. Like, don't forget that we're not in the, I think that the generations before us maybe had a harder time than we did to do some of the things we're doing now. But we, as, you know, people that were born here and are able to, you know, do crazy things. Yeah. You know, it's like anything is possible, you know? And so I like tried, I have to like actively remind myself and pray so much for the Lord to reteach me those things, because I feel like I was so bright-eyed and bushy-tailed like when I was a kid, and I had all these dreams and expectations of myself, but our community and culture in so many ways snuffs those things out of us, especially if you're a female. And so I feel like growing up in that now, I feel like I'm almost stuck to this mold of a box, and I can't seem to grow, or I can't seem to get any bigger than that. And thankfully, I feel like with prayer, I'm getting better at like seeing myself and you know, feeling like I can really do anything that God wants me to do. Like anything God has willed me to do, I can do it. Like I'm getting to that point now, but I wasn't like that. I don't think I was like that in the beginning. And, you know, you get trapped in this like weird, like, oh, what, like, of course I'm going to do what's expected of me. I'm not going to like do something really different and crazy. But definitely. I mean, I think we're meant to many ways break down some of the barriers and the walls that our culture and community has placed on us. And if you have always felt like, and this is to anybody listening, if you have felt like you are meant to do that, you probably are. So don't, I'm not asking you to be rebellious and like disobey everybody and just like be crazy, but like keep those dreams in your heart and write them down and bring them to the Lord and let him breathe on them, so you can see how he works in your life, like in the years to come.
I want to touch on something that you mentioned where you said, you know, there are struggles, but especially for females in our community. Could you speak to maybe that dynamic? What are some of those challenges maybe that you can speak to, or maybe that you've experienced?
I mean, just like even right now, I feel like the next thing that people are expecting from me is to start a family. And there's like all these expectations of me to like be a mom, but also like being in America, being a career woman now, like being a businesswoman in my own way, like there's that weird tension that I'm kind of working through myself. Like, okay, God, like I do feel like I'm supposed to start a family in the next couple of years. Like, can I trust you that you will maintain and manage my career in the middle of that? Because as you know, or as I've told you, I travel a lot for work and a lot of songwriting. I mean, I hate working on Zoom. Like, so I would much rather prefer to like be working in a more physical setting, like when I'm in the place. And so I would much rather do that. And so I don't know, I'm like, God, I don't know what this is going to look like, but we can trust God that I always think about how God used a woman to carry Jesus in her womb, right? And she had the ability to carry the divine within her. It wasn't man, it was woman. So we have the ability as women to carry life. And so I don't take that lightly. And so I mean that even outside of just like a physical pregnancy, but like we carry life even in our voice and in our mouths and our hearts. And so I really believe, and thankfully I've grown up, like my husband's mom is a pretty predominantly well-known speaker in our community as a female. And so she's someone I look up to too. And I have like people in my life that I can look up to that have really empowered me and have told me that my voice matters, especially in this community. And so definitely keep like trust and believe that, you know, God's obviously given given you a voice for a reason as a woman. Like he's made you a woman. Like if you're a woman listening to this, he's made you a woman for a reason, and you have a specific and a unique calling that he's called you to that is not like men.
Yeah. Now, if you were to have all this information back when you were, say, maybe 5-6-year-old, I'm sure that would change the dynamic of where you're at now. What's one piece of advice that you might share with a younger version of yourself that you wish you had sort of back then, knowing everything you know now?
Yeah, I would probably tell myself to not place limits on you know, where I'm going. Like, don't place limits on yourself. Like, definitely. And I think another thing is serve. I think I don't remember what verse this is, but it's like serve as if you're serving the Lord himself. Like in every opportunity, I feel like that's something I did, not to toot my own horn, but I really felt like even the little things at church, like I really tried my hardest to be committed even in those things. And I really believe God is honoring those things now for me. So maybe you're serving at a small church and in the middle of nowhere. But I can assure you, when you serve as if you are serving unto the Lord, like being faithful in those small things, you will really see the fruit of that. And it may not look like it looks like for me. Like it may not look like you being part of Maverick City music, you know, it could look like something else. Like it could look like, I don't know, like a family life that's really enriching and really, comforting for you, or it can look like so many different things, but you will always see the fruit of that. Like he promises us that. And so that's what I would say to my younger self, like don't put limits on yourself and serve as if you're serving unto the Lord.
I'm going to take that literally and just start my music career right now. I mean,
let's do it. Do it.
You know, you do not want to do that. I want to read it. Ephesians 6, verse 7, serve wholeheartedly as if you were serving the Lord, not people. And verse 8, because you know that the Lord will reward each one for whatever good they do, whether they are slave or free. I mean, I'm pretty inspired. And I think, you know, our female listeners or just next generation, or even if you're in your 40s, 50s, or 60s, or whoever, it's like, I think this is really good information to know, to live authentically, not place limits, and do what God's called you to do. And I really appreciate you, because I didn't want this podcast to be like, hey, let's just get famous people on, because what is that going to do? Right? Like, I feel like if there's people who are encouraging and influencing others with a gospel lens, right? And with a Christ-centered focus, that's what changes the world. That's what really restores our city, which is why we really wanted you on, because we understand that you have that perspective. So, Maryanne, thanks for being on. I know you probably have a million things to do, but
Oh no, I'm so happy to be here. I was just so worried my laptop was gonna die.
Wait, that's what our plan was, to just keep talking to you until your screen.
Like, wow,
literally.
this is like perfect timing because I just got like the 4%.
Right, oh
God. But thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor, and I love hearing and seeing what God is doing through other people in our community. And so thanks for being an avenue that people can share those things with. So
we really appreciate it, and best of luck to you. We will be listening. So where can people find you, follow you, and just kind of keep up with what you're doing?
Oh, I mean, you can follow me on social media. My name is Maryanne, MaryanneGeorge. So that's really, I don't really use
Google her and
on
you'll
YouTube.
Find her.
Yeah, I guess YouTube, you can just Google my name.
I did want to say, like, just a keynote. I know like Champion's been playing on YouTube, and I feel like the reason that song has been so popular is because I think Brandon Lake's wearing a Chicago Bulls t-shirt. I really feel like
oh man, dude, I can see that every time.
I feel like that's
somebody,
that's the
somebody
reason,
in somebody in the comments of that video thought he was wearing like a Satan shirt. So it was like a bull, like Satan. So
just wanted to bring it. Just need to bring it back.
I'm pretty sure that's a bull shirt, dude. Like,
yep.
Don't read too.
Just got to bring it back to the Midwest. You know, we are positive people.
It.
So no, I appreciate you, man.
But also in that video, the piano player was wearing a St. Louis shirt. So
there you go.
I didn't see that actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Deep dish pizza is the way to go. I feel like we've just really brought you into the fold here. So
love it.
Thank you, Maryanne. We appreciate you, and best of luck to you. Say hello to your family, and we look forward to everything that you're going to do in the future.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, MJ.
Take care. Thanks for listening to this episode. We really hope you enjoyed it. And if you haven't already, follow and subscribe to our podcast. You can find the Restoring Our City podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and you can also follow us on YouTube to watch the video versions of the episodes and engage in the conversation on social media as well. You can follow us at Restoring Our City on Instagram and Facebook, and The Rock Podcast on Twitter. You can find all that information on our website at restoringourcity.org. Thanks for listening.